If you develop applications, or if you write applications, or if you're thinking about deploying some application, or if you're a vibe coder and you have no idea where to put your application, how to make it accessible to people online, this video is for you. I've been writing code and doing full stack development for over a decade now, and I've been making this decision a lot. And I'm about to make this decision. Actually, I've just made this decision for a client of mine. And I wanted to kind of go through the thought process that I used to make this decision. I'll tell you what decision I made at the very end, but I wanted to go through a bunch of different options that I used and just how did I think about this and how did I make this decision? And maybe this is going to be helpful for you in making the decision for where you're going to put your own application. The first thought process I had was, can I put it on-prem? That means, is it my application? Can I put it here in my own studio or in my own office? Or can I put it, if it's not my application, can I put it literally on the servers of the company that I'm serving? You don't have to pay a subscription. You pay once. If it's a really small application, you just spin something up, you got it here, and it's kind of the simplest version. It's like the smallest version potentially of anything. If you can do it on-prem, I would actually do it on-prem. Don't discount the value of literally just taking an old laptop, using it as your own server. That's kind of the first place that I go, first thing I think about, and that might be your option. That doesn't work for me because I'm in kind of a temporary situation and my client is also in kind of a temporary situation. There's no real brick and mortar place to put the server that would end up potentially making some disruption to service. So I'm going to go with something online. That has narrowed my options. The next option that I have that's at the complete other end of the spectrum is just using a cloud platform and using a cloud network and setting everything up on that cloud network. There's three real options. There's AWS, my personal favorite. There's Google, which is also a fantastic option. And there's Azure, which is a good option if you're using business, if you're a really large business and you've ended up using all of the Microsoft technology anyways. That's a potential option. It's not my favorite option. I prefer to go with either AWS or Google. However, it depends on what you're doing. My rule of thumb is like 1 million. If I have 1 million users, I really want to start thinking about, hey, I need some AWS, right? I need to start doing AWS. I need to start doing Google. I need to start doing Azure. I need something better. But for my current application, my client is probably only going to have a few hundred users for the first foreseeable future. So I'm not really ready to go and throw a ton at that. I might even be able to get away with a hobbyist tier, which would be the best. Another option that I've used that's super free and super great and just like one of the best options that I could think of is GitHub Pages. If you don't have an application where you're mixing between these different things and you just want to take some HTML and chuck it up, you're a developer, you use GitHub already, GitHub Pages is an amazing option because it's free. It's always going to be free. At least I think so, and I hope so. I mean, GitHub's kind of gone through some weird stuff. Anyway, I would say GitHub Pages is one of my favorite places to put stuff if it's just super simple and it needs an easy place to just chuck some HTML up and call it a day. It's a great option. The next set of options is something that I think a lot of developers underappreciate and don't think about as much. This is going to be like your Wix. This is going to be your Squarespace and kind of all those other options, a couple of other options in that space. Shopify has an option. Webflow has an option. WordPress is obviously, there's so much of the internet that is on WordPress, Wix, all of these things. So these are very, very serious options. You can absolutely use these. And if you don't need to deal with the complexity of something, if you just want a website, doesn't need to be an application, whatever, these are options that you should absolutely consider. If you're like, oh my gosh, I need to think about how to host this huge set, maybe it's just a little website. don't overcomplicate it on yourself. It's better to create value in the world, and it's better to create value for your customer and your clients than it is to sit there and mull over and then sit there and deal with being on the console forever. So if you just need a website, just make a website, use one of those, have them sign up for something like that, and that's a great option. The next set, I'm not a super huge fan of, but they do have their place. This is your things like Vercel. If you're going to use Vercel, you're going to be kind of vendor locked in. You're probably using Next.js, and you're going to have this set of vendor lock-in. You're using JavaScript. You're kind of stuck in this space. There's also stuff like Netlify, which can also, I think, do Next.js maybe. Then there's also Firebase, which has a very similar kind of vendor lock-in option. And then there's Cloudflare, which has some other Cloudflare is much less vendor lock-in-ish, but they do have some options that do kind of end up putting you in this vendor lock-in. There is a reason to use these if you have a client who is already using it and you're gonna be on Vercel. Sorry, but if you're thinking about what to do fresh and new, I would actually veer away from things like Vercel. I would veer away from things like Netlify because of the vendor lock-in aspect of it. I would just separate myself a little bit, and there's some other options that are very similar and have a very similar dev experience that are kind of the next options I'm going to talk about. But I would veer away from those and think about things that are going to keep you away from vendor lock-in and keep your stack simple, right? And it might seem simple right now to do Vercel because it's a click button done, and your dev experience is a super, super easy, slick experience. There's a couple other options that are pretty similar, just slightly larger complexity. I would go with those options over your vendor lock-in options. The last 4 that I have on my little list here, I would say there's a lot of other options in this space, so don't just think about these, but we've got stuff like Heroku, which got rid of its free tier and caused a whole bunch of drama in the whole dev space, but still a great option, still an option for that. And then Fly.io and Railway. And then lastly, the one that I'm actually going to go with for my client is Render. They have a little free tier, but we're not going to be using that free tier. If you're a dev and you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I get this in the world? And I don't have any users right now, but I really want to do that, then Render's a great option. Render's a fantastic option. If you're in a little bit bigger of a space and you have, my rule of thumb is 1 million. If you're thinking about, look, if I got 1 million users or more, and I know that I'm going to end up with 1 million users pretty quick within the first year, I would say AWS is the right space. And if you have some budget, then I would say AWS is the right space. If you're in this small to mid-sized business space, I would honestly stick with one of these options for now and make sure that your app is not going to be vendor lock-in on something, so you can actually take your app and transfer it over to something else. So you're not using your Vercel. I'm sure they're not happy about me saying that. I'm sorry, guys. But I wouldn't use Vercel. I would jump to something like one of these. I ended up on Render because I've used it before, and it's going to be a path of least resistance for me. But that doesn't mean I haven't used Heroku before. I've had stuff on Fly.io. I haven't used Railway, but it's another option in that space. And I'm sure there's some other little options that you could think about and that are going to serve you well there. So that's how I think about an application. That's how I think about the decision that I just made, which ended up being Render. Am I above 1 million? Am I below 1 million? Is this going to be small for me and some friends? And should I put it here on-prem? Or do I have the capability to put it on-prem? And is it going to cause problems with scalability if I put it on-prem? All these different things. Hopefully, seeing me kind of think through this on camera was helpful. And if you have any questions, comment down below. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about this in particular. And if you enjoyed this, I would appreciate a like. And then also, I'm going to be doing more stuff like this. So I'm going to be talking about frameworks. I'm going to be talking about languages. I'm going to be talking about what sort of things you should be considering, or not necessarily you, but like what sorts of things do I consider when I'm thinking about what language should I use, or what sort of framework should I use, or maybe it's how should I handle whatever it is. As I'm going through this process for my client, I'm going to take little parts of what I'm doing for my client and put those on the internet for you so that you can see what sorts of things I'm thinking through, how I'm thinking through this, and hopefully it's helpful for you. If it is, great, awesome. That makes me really happy. See you in the next one.